Welcome everyone to the Hurting Humanity channel. If you haven't heard, very quietly, we're having a lot of once in a thousand year rainfall events. And of course, conveniently on Sunday, September 15th, leading into Monday, September 16th, North Carolina was slammed once again with massive amounts of rain. And the reason, of course, that no one's heard about it is because everybody's paying attention to the controlled news that they want you to hear. In this case, obviously, another failed assassination attempt on Donald Trump, where we have multiple political parties, the left and the right, pointing fingers at each other, calling for a setup on each side, not realizing that the entire thing is a setup. The entire thing is a trap. And anybody who's looking for my videos on what is going on with Donald Trump and the second assassination attempt, you can find it on my other channel, the Rebel Call channel, which is linked below. Make sure you are subscribed to it if you're not. That's where my new content is going between channels, this one and that one. So the story obviously isn't getting much press about the rainfall they're getting in North Carolina, but if you haven't heard, this isn't, you hear the term once in a thousand year rainfall event? Well, this is their new term. You see, this is what they're normalizing now, because back, if you didn't hear, on July 30th, there was catastrophic flooding forcing water rescues in Vermont after a 1 in 1,000 year rainfall event. And if you haven't heard, well, even a year ago, on July 9th, 2023, in New York, there was a 1 in 1,000 year rainfall event. And hey, I don't know if you heard, but last year, or at least this year, in January, I should say, earlier this year, there was a 1,000-year storm, a 1 in 1,000 year event that occurred in San Diego. And wait, I don't know if you guys heard or not, but there was also a 1,000-year storm in Connecticut. So apparently the new narrative that they're using is they're calling these 1 in 1,000 year storms. Now you might say, well, that's weird. Why are all these states getting a 1 in 1,000 year storm? Well, of course, because of climate change. What else could it possibly be? Don't look at stupid patents that the government themselves have, like hurricane and tornado controlled devices. If you look at something like that, like patent US 20030085296A1, if you look at something like that and actually read what it says about a method is disclosed for affecting the formation and or direction of a low atmospheric weather system. Audio generators are positioned to protect sound waves towards a peripheral area of a weather system. The sound waves are generated at a frequency to affect the formation of the weather system in a manner to disrupt, enhance, or direct the formation. The sound waves can also be protected in a manner to cause the system to produce rain. Don't look at that, because if you do, you're a conspiracy theorist, despite it being patented by the United States government. Also, do not look at suspicious events involving earthquakes, like the one in Turkey. You know, the same earthquake simulator that Tesla created that was stolen by the government, some say by Donald Trump's uncle. Don't look at that either, or you're a conspiracy theorist. Now, of course, you could do all those things and actually see what's going on and wake up, or you could just listen to John F. Kennedy or Lyndon B. Johnson themselves all the way back in the 1950s and 60s.
We shall propose further cooperative efforts between all the nations in weather prediction and eventually in weather control.
It lays the predicate foundation for the development of a weather satellite that will permit man to determine the world's cloud layer and ultimately to control the weather, and he who controls the weather will control the world.
So make no mistake about it. We're seeing once in 1,000 year rainfall by design. They're quietly flooding out areas that they're choosing with significant amounts of rainfall, which are causing people to be uprooted. Almost like the way you would herd a sheep, right? You know, you get a sheep and you could herd them around. You ever see, videos, pictures, maybe you do it yourself, a sheep herder, right? Well, we have human sheep, we call them sheeple, and they're being moved around just like sheep. They're targeting specific states and they're flooding them out of specific zones, making it nearly impossible for them to stay in those locations. In fact, some of these areas that have been flooded out, you may recall a YouTuber sounded a lot like me who did videos talking about how instead of building their homes back through insurance on their land, that FEMA was actually just buying the land themselves and offering people double the amount of money they would even get. So they were saying to themselves, I might as well just take the money and run, because of course they're being forced and forced and forced out of these spots. And again, I've also talked about my fear, and it's not really a fear for me personally, but I do have concern for people. I do care about people, despite what many say about me. I care about people and people falling for deceptions. And it seems like, well, if the government has the capability to do this, just imagine if they had all the people who are Republican, even though they're following what they want by voting and following Donald Trump, but their ideologies are all very anti-New World Order. They're nationalists, right? Imagine you could get all of them to sit in states like Texas, like Florida, because suddenly states are leaving the union because they're not believing the outcome of a fake election. Imagine you could do that. What the government could do with this type of technology. Wow, they could really destroy their homes and destroy their lives and then force them into FEMA cities and FEMA camps and call them something else like freedom cities and freedom camps that are rolled out for them. And they probably wouldn't even know the difference. However, they would be sitting ducks for the government. So clearly these 1 in 1,000-year storms are not the cause of climate change, because geoengineering is the cause of climate change, which is pretty much fancy terminology to just tell you what it flat out is: the government manipulating weather. And for anyone who's been following my work over the last, I don't know, however many years it's been, one of the videos I put out there I really want to show everybody, because again, anyone who's new probably hasn't seen this. Longtime subs probably have, but you should definitely capture this documentary that Disney put out called Eyes in Outer Space. It's called Eyes in Outer Space, and I'm going to play it for you in its entirety, and I highly recommend you watch it, because this is Disney telling you about back in the 1960s, how they had the ability to manipulate the weather and how they'd be able to steer hurricanes away from specific spots. Now flash forward, how many years later? Almost 60 years plus later. And you think about the technology they were talking about then and what they possibly have. Well, why would, at the time when they tell you this stuff, they're talking about it for the benefit of humanity. Well, it's pretty clear the government does not care about human beings that live beneath it. In fact, the government wants to do everything it can to ruin everybody's lives, especially people who are anti-globalism. So just imagine this technology now. And instead of steering hurricanes offshore, if you knew that one was going to hit Florida, just imagine what the government's doing with this technology to steer hurricanes onto shore to destroy people's homes and their lives, because that is what they're doing. Here is the documentary in full. Remember, this is from Disney. You know, most people would now look at a lot of Democrats out there, people identify as Democrats, that species of people that are obsessed with Disney, that are still dressing up as Disney characters, still going to Disneyland, pretending they're going for their kids, but going for themselves because they can't actually grow up. Well, they're obsessed with Disney, so you think maybe this would stick with them. You know, all the stuff in Tomorrowland that they used to show you that's now a reality, because they had this technology even before it was told to us back in the 1960s time period, when they tell you it was a race to get there, right? So here it is. And remember, JFK, Lyndon B. Johnson, all these people have talked about controlling the weather. They have the ability to control the weather. And you're seeing it right now with this new terminology, this 1,000-year storm, 1 in 1,000-year storm. People just affected in North Carolina. People on the East Coast are going to continue to get hammered, and the West Coast, with these storms. And specifically, you're going to start seeing states that identify as conservative Republican states, that the large population in those states, those are states that are not swing states, right, like Texas, are the ones who are going to get drilled with this type of stuff. Only because, even though the left-right is fake, remember, most conservatives are Christian. Most conservatives, even though they're falling for this thing hook, line, and sinker, do have nationalist ideologies, and you cannot have that type of ideology going forward in a new world order. You must become a globalist or else. This is them telling you about the ability to manipulate the weather a long, long time ago. And of course, just remember when you watch this, they have the ability to do all this stuff then, like make it rain, but of course we still have droughts and we still have all these other problems that they cause that make it difficult to grow food because they don't want you to be able to be independent of them and live off grid, etc. but they'll never make it rain to help places in droughts. What they'll do is make it rain to destroy people's lives and flood them out of zones.
The world of tomorrow and the instruments of science which are shaping it may seem remote and fantastic, but yesterday's fantasies are becoming today's facts. How will these great advances influence and benefit our personal lives? Here in this film is an answer. Sweeping through an eternal vacuum, through blazing heat and bitter cold, exposed to mysterious radiation, man-made satellites circle the Earth. Traveling at fantastic speeds, these eyes in outer space give us knowledge for future exploration, and also vital information that will lead to a better understanding of one of nature's great forces, the weather. With awesome violence and destruction, the weather is one of man's oldest and mightiest adversaries. But in its ever-changing moods, the weather brings us beauty. The weather gives us our daily bread. The weather makes possible all living things. And the weather certainly influences our daily lives. Yes, we have always been at the mercy of weather. When the weather is nice, we are happy. If the weather is hot and muggy, we tend to be frustrated, irritable, and even criminal. But if the fog rolls in, we are apt to be depressed. Thunderstorms cause fear and apprehension. Icy winds and snow seem to slow us down. In trying to predict these capricious changes in weather, we sometimes resort to rather questionable weather forecasting devices, such as an almanac, a crystal ball, a gouty leg, and the law of average.
April showers bring May flowers. When mule ears shake in a certain way, it means that rain will fall that day. If a spider you should slay, rain will fall within a day. It's a sign of rain and snow when the birds and bugs fly low. As the weather is on New Year's Day, for 30 days 'twill stay that way. As the weather is on January 2, for February and September the same holds true. As the weather is on January 3, so the last 3 months of spring will be. As the weather is on November 21, so the coming winter's one. One is one, winter's one. So, as the coming winter has a New Year's Day, and if the fine weather holds its sway, the weather's bound to stay that way forever, ever, and a day.
Well, no matter how we try to predict the weather, of this we can be certain. It will always be with us. To understand it, let's look into any ocean, lake, pond, or puddle. Here in this watery world, cool and calm as can be, lives this damp little drip floating peacefully. But when the heat's on, the sun comes out. The rays, they agitate him, make him jump about. Well, he gets all shook. Look out, stand back. He's going to blow his stack. The drip evaporates, and then he's joined by his friends. They're together again. They float up high on the moist, warm air. We can't see them, but they're still there. They fly way up where the cold's intense, then back into droplets. They condense, and that's what makes a cloud. But when too many droplets crowd a cloud, that crowded cloud, he cries out loud. That's the way we get the rain. Well, look who's here, the little drip again. Back in the puddle. Heat, beat, rise, skies. And that's what makes a cloud. This time those drops are blasted high. Still higher, still colder. Look at them fly. One turns to ice, another stick to it, getting bigger and bigger. Look out! I knew it! It's way too heavy! It's falling! Wow! The little drip's a hailstone now. He's back just where he was before, and the whole thing's ready to start once more. This constantly repeating cycle of weather may seem capricious and without direction, but throughout nature there is order. Weather is a constant blending of the basic elements: air, water, and sun. It all starts with the sun. This tremendous white-hot ball of gas, 750,000 miles across, supplies the power that drives our weather machine. The sun is a gigantic atomic furnace, consuming itself at the rate of billions of pounds of matter per second. Across its boiling surface drift mysterious spots. Solar flares surge in flashes of raw energy. Writhing, flaming clouds of incandescent hydrogen gas explode hundreds of thousands of miles into space. The sun is absolutely essential to life on our planet. Our Earth is surrounded by an envelope of air. Radiant energy, constantly pouring out from the sun, heats the Earth and its atmosphere unevenly from pole to equator, setting in motion broad, flowing rivers of air. Wherever opposing currents of air develop, giant eddies and whirlpools are formed. These are traveling areas of low pressure in the atmosphere. The clash of these opposing air streams causes clouds to form, and usually brings stormy weather. Between the areas of low pressure, there are eddies rotating in the opposite direction. Here, air pressure is high. This usually brings clear skies and fair weather. By charting their positions each day, weathermen can estimate the course they will take and the weather that will result. Keeping track of the steady parade of storms and fair weather requires the constant preparation of new maps. This is a never-ending task. Weathermen must construct these maps from a continuous flow of data that pours in from weather stations all over the world. In remote, isolated areas, in crowded cities, in high-flying aircraft, and in ships at sea, modern weathermen depend on a variety of specialized instruments to gather information. They measure temperature, moisture, air pressure, and wind speed. Balloons carry instruments aloft, automatically radioing back information. New radar techniques locate and track storms. And modern electronic computers now play an important part in weather forecasting by their ability to store and rapidly process vast amounts of data. But today, we are just beginning to understand something of the forces behind the weather. Scientists realize they must search in many directions and ask countless questions. For instance, can future weather be predicted by looking at the past? Does the slow advance and retreat of glaciers over periods of centuries indicate cycles in the Earth's climate? Past records of bird and animal migration, or the migrations of man, may furnish clues. And even ancient tree rings give an indication of wet and dry periods. The vast unexplored polar regions of the Earth pose another kind of question. What effect do these frigid areas, covering millions of square miles, have on the weather of the entire world? Auroras, the ghostly lights that flicker in polar skies, tell something of what happens when energy from the sun plunges into the sea of air that surrounds the Earth. Adventurous scientists are probing the atmosphere itself, climbing to incredible altitudes in their search for knowledge. New scientific tools are being used, rockets launched from balloons. And rockets launched from the ground carry instruments higher and higher. Unfortunately, these flights last but a short time, and only a small amount of information can be obtained. But now we have more advanced scientific devices for gathering data continuously over long periods of time, not only from the atmosphere, but from space beyond. Artificial satellites. Satellites reach into the unknown with instruments that duplicate man's own senses. The eye of the satellite is a photocell or a radiation counter. Its ear, a tiny microphone. Its memory, a tape recorder. And its voice is a radio transmitter. Here, these instruments are placed in an actual weather satellite, designed to record the cloud formations covering the Earth. In this cross-section view, we see how all the instruments have been reduced to an amazingly compact unit weighing but a few pounds. Here is one of the electronic eyes of the satellite. This eye converts the light reflected from land, ocean, and cloud into electrical impulses. These impulses from the eyes are changed into electronic signals that are recorded by this tiny tape machine. Recording continuously for periods of nearly an hour, this incredibly small instrument remembers everything the weather satellite sees. Triggered by a radio signal from Earth, the recorder plays back the stored information in only 1 minute. These precious reports on the Earth's cloud patterns are received by specially designed stations on the ground. The radio signals from the satellite are now converted back to a moving pattern of light on the oscilloscope. and finally translated into a picture of the cloud formations the satellite has seen during one trip around the Earth. Today's weather satellites are small and are designed to do a limited job. However, they are the first step forward to larger and more versatile space explorers of tomorrow. These future satellites will be the key to precise forecasting and control of weather. Let us project our present knowledge with a little imagination and speculate on how satellites might be used in future operations from a worldwide weather center. This is the master control room. Electronic maps and view screens display up-to-the-minute pictures of the weather around the Earth. Every hour, reports are automatically received from all points at sea, on land, and in the air. 22,000 miles out in space, 3 robot satellites train their sensitive television eyes on all parts of the Earth. These pictures are monitored on viewing screens in the Weather Center. Here in the computing room, electronic machines digest the constant flood of information received from all stations. This is then translated into an ever-changing diagram of the Earth's weather. Forecasts for every sector of the globe are made months in advance. Prediction charts have indicated that a powerful hurricane will begin forming today in the Atlantic Ocean. The electronic weather map shows an intense storm system building up about 1,000 miles due east of Miami, Florida. The controller calls for a close-up satellite view of the troubled area.
Coordinates. Coco 526, Yankee 2.5.
Okay, controller. Coco 526, Yankee 2.5.
The characteristic swirling clouds of the hurricane are beginning to form. At sea, the waves anticipate the violence to come. The controller calls for a last-minute prediction of the hurricane's path. If control measures are not begun at once, the hurricane will smash across densely populated areas within 48 hours.
11 a.m. EST. A hurricane is forming 960 miles east of Miami, Florida. If control measures are ineffective, it will pass inland at Cape Hatteras in 48 hours. Control operations will begin within 2 hours, but safety precautions should be completed from Cape Fear, north no later than 6 p.m. tomorrow.
At Weather Central, the control strategy is mapped out. A ridge of high pressure slants across the eastern United States between 2 low-pressure storm systems. If these 2 storm centers are intensified, the high will build up along the coast, forming a barrier that will turn the hurricane out to sea.
Stand by. Now pulling in satellite number 1 for visual check of low-pressure systems L20 and L21.
The operator brings the satellite into focus on the 2 storms. One centered over Kansas, the other over Labrador.
Changing to northeastern low, L21.
With a touch of a button, the battle begins. On the ground, chemical cloud seeders begin to work the 2 storm areas. Robot planes seed the clouds from above. The storm centers over Kansas and over Labrador intensify as seeding continues.
Now changing over to Hurricane Center H8.
The fury of the hurricane mounts as 100-mile-an-hour winds lash the sea to a foaming frenzy.
All stations, Sector C. Activate Phase 2, Control Plan Delta. Set vapor rockets for 42,000 feet. Execute.
As an emergency measure, the controller calls for a salvo of vapor rockets to be fired ahead of the path the hurricane is predicted to take. These artificial clouds will block the sun from evaporating more water to feed the hurricane. The reports coming into the control center indicate that the diversionary cloud seeding over Kansas is now creating a flood danger. Specially equipped robot aircraft are dispatched immediately to release a high concentration of cloud seeding material into the fringes of the storm. Heavier seeding from the ground also helps to subdue the rain by spreading it over a wider area. The controller calls for another view of the hurricane, which has now moved closer to the coast.
Signal out on number 1 satellite. 10-minute interruption for correction. Have you anything else in the area?
Satellite station S1 is approaching area. We'll make contact. S1, this is Weather Central. Request video signal at grid coordinates COCO.
An emergency situation has developed. In an orbiting space station 1,000 miles above the hurricane, a crewman sends a temporary picture back to Weather Central.
Okay, S1, your video is R5S5. Thank you.
The hurricane has stopped moving toward the coast, but is still intensifying. It must be made to move northward and out to sea. This is a crisis.
Aberdeen Station, activate multiple seeding rockets on course 117.
The controller decides to fire cloud seeding rockets just ahead of the hurricane, hoping to start it moving. Slowly, the hurricane begins to shift. All available forces have been brought into play. Now we can only watch and wait. After hours of tension, the turning point is reached. Latest reports indicate the control strategy is successful. At last, the high-pressure ridge has settled along the coast, forming an invisible wall of safety. The storm is over. The danger has passed. The hurricane has been defeated, turned away from the land, and left to spend itself harmlessly far out at sea. In the world of tomorrow, weather control will enrich and safeguard our daily lives. In the foreseeable future, we will conquer more than violent storms. We will turn the destructive elements of today into new sources of power, shaping the land on which we live. All mankind will benefit. Arid wastelands will be made green and fertile, and vast frozen areas will become productive. To this end, man-made satellites will probe the secrets of the skies. They will be our eyes in outer space.